One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. Today, we're diving into a powerful healing modality that's been changing lives, EMDR therapy. Joining me is my guest, Laurel, a licensed therapist who's going to walk us through what EMDR is, how it works, and why it can be such an effective tool for trauma recovery. Here's Laurel. Hi, Laurel. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi.
So before we get into our topic, I would like for you to give a background just so listeners can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, well, as therapists go, I'm kind of one of the weirdos in that I always knew this was the plan for me. That I always knew that I was going to be involved in helping people build and identify their resilience, tell and reframe their story, and really make the journey from victim to survivor in some capacity. And I knew this at age 12 after I had my first therapy session. And that, I know very few people that are still on plan A, my father being one of the only other people, because most of us have many careers in our lifetime. But knowing that early on, all the choices that I was making as a young adult were putting me on this path towards being a therapist and having this trauma specialty. And I think that's probably the most important thing for people to know, because it feels like the most salient part of my professional identity is like, this was plan A and no regrets at all. Yeah.
That's crazy because at 12, I don't know that I even thought about the future at all. Mm-hmm. And I know that I laugh at myself because I went on to become a nurse practitioner, but at one point in one of the yearbooks, I put that my goal was to be a housewife. So and that was even after 12 years old. So it's pretty amazing that you already knew.
I think I've always been a future-oriented person, which sometimes pulls me out of the present moment, which is not always a good thing. So aiming for more mindfulness.
Right. I can relate to that. I'm always looking toward the future too. So, okay. And is there a specific area of therapy that you were going for that you definitely wanted to get into?
I had to dabble a bit because you don't know till you've done it if it's your thing. So in graduate school, you have to do a bunch of different placements, much like nursing. I assume you kind of do rotations. And I worked in a family Medi-Cal clinic, which in California there's the public health insurance. So working with low-income families and kids, working in a middle school as the therapist, and that I did have some regrets then. I was like, I don't know if I should have become a therapist. Like, middle school is rough. But then I started working with adults and I'm like, oh no, this is great. I love this. It's just those middle school years are rough.
Oh yeah. I have two middle school boys right now. So yes, I can.
So hard. Yes. But even before I was in graduate school, I knew this was the path. And so I was a psych major and like looking at wanting to get some more hands-on experience. And I ended up doing an internship at the local rape crisis center. We don't call them that anymore. We usually give them a little bit more of a kind of vague name, but it was right across the street from my college. I had a great relationship with the person that was supervising and training me there, and that really set me on the path towards working specifically with trauma and having somewhat of a niche in sexual trauma.
I imagine that's a very specific niche. Not a lot of people specialize in those areas.
But I also feel like it shouldn't be because, 1 in 3.
Right.
And, if you're a therapist worth your salt, you have to be trained in trauma. And if you work with, I'm not even going to say women, like you're going to encounter sexual trauma on your caseload. So I think probably a lot of therapists have some skill It's just not something that they've sought out, like specific training and had specific experience around hospital accompaniment and like the kind of initial crisis period right after a trauma. But, you know, many of our clients come in with sexual trauma.
Have you ever, even in your training or now, have you had to go into hospitals or get calls or anything from emergencies?
Very briefly, yes. I only went in a couple of times, but I'm really glad that I had that experience. I think it helps to have that kind of like immediate aftermath experience to understand that like there's no normal in terms of how someone acts or behaves or thinks. Like there would be people who would be like laughing the whole time they were in the hospital, and some people were completely dissociated, and there's some people who were like just so overwhelmed or like beside themselves, and all of those are normal and okay. Right. So just understanding that you go into a part of your brain that is just, you know, reptilian.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And people say that all the time. You know, everyone is always judging how others react to different traumatic events, you know, especially the ones that the big news ones. Do people refer to you? Like if you were a therapist and you're seeing somebody and then you realize that this trauma might be too much for me, I need to refer them out to someone who specializes more?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, trauma tends to manifest in a way that like it's very rare that it would just like suddenly be uncovered, because there would be symptoms that would be showing up in relationships or sleep or something like that we can kind of tell. So it would be pretty rare that it would surprise a therapist after they've already been working with them for a while. And, but what I do see a lot of in my practice, and I actually have multiple clinicians in my practice. We have just a very small little group, and we all specialize in EMDR therapy, which is totally research-backed. It looks and feels totally weird, but it does work. And we do get a lot of people that refer to us for adjunct EMDR work. So they'll be doing talk therapy with someone else and then coming for this very specific type of trauma processing with us. So yes, that we definitely get plenty of referrals for, because there's so much research specifically on EMDR for sexual trauma. That like you don't want to just be throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like you want to try something that's like very likely to work on the first try.
Yeah. And I'm glad that people are referring out to it and not trying to just, you know, watch a YouTube video and go jump in and say, I can do it.
It's actually a very nuanced modality. Like it looks very simple on the outside, but like the neurobiology of trauma and how do you actually rewire the brain? Yeah, that's going to be more than watching a YouTube video.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about EMDR because it is so detailed. I did it twice, same therapist, two different memories, but I did it. It was amazing. So yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because it feels so good as a provider to have something that is so effective that people can often see like pretty tangible results quickly, and that actually allows them to like just feel free, to feel like they are like not carrying it around with them anymore. It's not that it's like we've erased the memory and it's like that eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. It's not that. It's just like, what happened was not okay, and I'm okay now even though that happened. That's what EMDR does, like truly on like a body level, feeling that way. I'm okay even though that happened. So yeah, I love talking about it because it's incredible.
Well, and so you mentioned rewiring the brain. So can you talk a little bit about what trauma does and then what EMDR hopes to do, I guess, when you're doing EMDR?
Yeah. So interrupt me at any time that I start using like jargon, okay? I'm going to try and explain it like really simply. So when something that is a real or perceived threat to your safety or your livelihood or your kind of homeostasis happens, the brain categorizes it differently. It flags it and says, oh, this is something important. We need to remember this. So it's kind of like putting a big, red flag on this memory, because we need to remember this to protect you in the future. And so you become hypervigilant because of this. And that hypervigilance, it's exhausting. It interrupts your sleep. It disrupts your relationships. And it can, I don't need to tell listeners how, disruptive trauma can be. But if you kind of have this like cartoonish visualization of the brain, that there are these memories that have these big red flags on them, you're going to devote disproportionate resources to those memories. Even if something is likely to never happen again, the brain is like, this is still important. This is still important, right? And what EMDR does is basically like take the red flag off of that memory and be like, you know what? Yes, we needed this information to protect us and to get through at the time. And we can also store this with all the other memories, because we don't need your body to suddenly get totally like jacked up and activated every time you think about this. That's no longer necessary. So it really cuts that tie between the memory and that like physiological reaction that you have. So you can think about something upsetting and feel physically neutral. That's what EMDR can do by storing the memory in multiple places in the brain rather than just in that one flagged spot.
Okay. So it sprinkles it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it ties it to other memories that are somewhat neutral to positive. So I like to say we create these little trauma islands. And once we find ourselves on trauma island, it's hard to get off that island. And EMDR either like gives you a boat or like builds bridges so that anytime you end up on the island, you can get off the island with no problem. You don't feel trapped and scared.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little bit of work you need to do before you jump into EMDR,
yes,
too, right?
Yes. And actually, for some people, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is actually the number one red flag that I would say if you're doing EMDR and your therapist skips this, that's a big problem. I totally understand the desire to get to the cool part of EMDR, which is the reprocessing, which is the thing with the eye movement or the tapping or the beeping or whatever bilateral stimulations being used, which we can talk about. But I get people wanting to get to the part where they're actually going to see some results. But the problem is if you've not done the prep work and you don't yet have coping skills to handle the intensity of EMDR, because EMDR hinges on you being able to fully access what happened without it being kind of muted or pushed away, to like really sit with the discomfort of the memory. If you have not prepared at all and you have no coping skills and self-soothing strategies, EMDR is going to be too intense and you're likely to drop out and not want to continue and not see the benefit. So that preparation and resourcing phase, which EMDR is 8 phases, and that's phase 1 and 2. And some people think, oh yeah, I'll just come in and we'll like talk for a few minutes and then I'll move my eyes and then the trauma will go away. No.
No.
I would say it's not super common, but we definitely have had people in our practice that we spend a year on those first 2 phases. Because with complex trauma, with relational trauma, particularly complex childhood trauma, you're not going to have those coping skills ready to go. And it's going to be way too difficult to just, okay, let's talk about all your trauma. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a really negative experience. So it is uncommon to spend that long, but I've definitely seen it a handful of times in the, almost 7 years that I've been doing EMDR.
Okay. Yeah. And can you talk what happens when you get to the point of EMDR?
Mm-hmm. The processing.
Yes.
Part. So first you do what's called targeting, which is you talk about the memory. Now, you don't have to be super detailed in what you tell your EMDR therapist. So if there's something that feels like, yeah, I just can't say it out loud, but it's very present in my mind and I'm very much with it, then that's okay. But to fully target something, you access the memory and then you identify the negative thought, the emotions, the body sensations, and the visuals that go with it. And please don't do this at home. You cannot self-EMDR.
No.
Yeah. And then the therapist talks you through a series of exercises while there's either tapping or beeping or a light that you follow. And over time, the intensity of the feeling around that target goes down. And if it doesn't go down, you're not doing anything wrong. Your therapist needs to figure out what the stuck piece is. Because in an uncomplicated EMDR scenario, let's say, I'll pick one that's unlikely to resonate with listeners. Let's say a college athlete has an injury and their target is like lying on the field looking up and like they know that their ACL is torn or something. And they come into EMDR therapy and the disturbance they feel when thinking about lying on the field is like an 8 out of 10. And then over time, over several sessions, it gets down to a 0. And they can truly access the memory. They still remember it. They often say it's fuzzier. It's harder to access. They're like, yeah, I mean, I know I was on the field. I know the grass was green. I know my teammates were there, but like it's a lot blurrier to me now. And they can think about it and be like, yeah, but I'm still here in this room. And like, I'm actually kind of hungry. I'm thinking about what I want to have for dinner, which usually when we think about a trauma, like we get hijacked back into the trauma. So it can go from a 10 down to a 0. And that's the goal. Mm-hmm. Now, always be honest with your EMDR therapist. Don't just say it's going down to a 0 because you think it should. Like, be honest about the level of disturbance that you feel. And that's, of course, a very textbook case. It goes from a 10 to a 0 immediately, and it's definitely not usually within one session. Although sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember my therapist asked how familiar I was with EMDR before we started, and I said I'm a little bit, but the way my brain works is it will put a stop to anything if I can figure out what's supposed to happen. So I said, give me what I need to know. But don't go into too much detail because otherwise my brain's just going to be like, no, we're not doing this. And, at first.
Good insight.
Yeah. No, I know. My brain's a pain in the butt a lot of times. But I remember when we started at first and she did the finger movement back and forth. And I remember watching and I was like, this is ridiculous.
I know. Oh, I still feel that way. And I've been an EMDR therapist for years.
Yeah.
It's totally bizarre.
It is like, so bizarre.
You're going to do what? And it's going to make my trauma go away. Like, it takes a lot of blind faith. And for people who, if their trauma is, a 10 out of 10, that is a big ask to like be that uncomfortable in a room with a therapist and they're waving their hand saying it's going to make it go. Like, it's absurd. It looks and sounds absurd. Yeah.
It really is. And I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm at my trauma. I'm there. And I'm like, but I'm not because I'm blocking myself. And it took a while for me to really get into it. And, it's so emotional, like every single emotion, not all right away. This was multiple sessions, but it went through, all sorts of emotions that I didn't even know were there. But it was a very, very vivid memory.
Yes. I think one of the strengths of EMDR is that it puts you into a feeling and reacting state that sometimes we mentally override, particularly, people that are smart, academic, driven, that we can be a little cerebral. And that sometimes gets in the way of our healing. That if we actually tap into reactions and our body sensations, then we're like, oh yeah, there's something here.
Yeah. Well, and that's what she kept saying. She's like, that was a lot of work that we had to do before we started EMDR, was for me to recognize in my body when I was feeling certain things. And
Yep.
that was very strange for me because I'm a very head thinker, you know, everything's from my head. And so, tapping into actually the feelings that my body was experiencing and where in my body and how to describe it.
Yep.
That was very strange. But it is, like you said, you're in the present. So you do have to dive into that memory, but you know it's safe because you're not actually there.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't feel safe because they mentally go back into it and really feel fully in it and are having a very unsafe physical reaction. But you can logically know you're safe and not feel safe. And I don't care if someone logically knows they are safe after a trauma. My goal is to get them to feeling safe. Like actually believing with their body that they're safe. That's the goal of EMDR. Because we can all like logically look around and be like, yep, I'm in my house. And yet, if you were to think of a car accident you were in, you would feel like you were in your car and it was happening, even if you logically know. So yeah, it is that disconnect between what we logically know is true and what our body is telling us is true. And when we have a particular like mental defense against bridging that, it can be challenging, and EMDR is really good at overriding that. It also sounds, I think I was picking up on like a little bit of dissociation that was happening.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Which, like, no judgment. In fact, let's thank dissociation for protecting us for so long, because it is an adaptive coping strategy. Sometimes we have to dissociate to survive because the intensity of being in the present moment is unbearable. So like, thank goodness dissociating is an option. And it can become maladaptive when it gets in the way of your life and enjoying like the depth of quality of relationships and work and like emotional presence with things. And it can interfere with trauma healing, because if at the first sign of trauma you dissociate, well, yeah, then we really got to build up that toolkit to handle the intensity of the trauma so that we don't dissociate, because we do have to be fully present with it to process it.
Oh, yeah. My therapist had a lot of work cut out for her because, you know, I got out of my relationship and I thought I was fine. I was like, oh, that was easy, you know, and carrying on life. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, why are they saying that? Is that my true friends wondering what their intentions were by what they were saying? And like nothing was harmful. And then I realized, I'm like, I don't think I'm okay. And so I went in, and I told her, I said, listen, this happened and it's in a nice little box and it's up on a shelf in my brain. It's there. I know it's there, but I don't want to take it out of the box. I just want to leave it there. Like, let's just store it away. And it was a lot of work before we did EMDR. And then it got to the point, she's like, do you want to consider EMDR? And like when you said that light feeling, the second time we did it was specific to that trauma from my relationship. And it was all of a sudden just like this heavy weight just released. And I'm like, I almost feel like I'm floating. This is the weirdest feeling. And I had been crying profusely before. And then all of a sudden I'm smiling and I'm like, whoa, this is the best feeling.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
You know, if you had come to me and said, had come to me as a therapist and said, hey, everything's in this neat little box, I don't really want to touch it, I would have said, would you be okay with me keeping the box for a little bit?
Oh.
And then maybe someday we can open it together, but pack it up before you leave the office every time.
Oh, that's
and then
interesting.
Eventually the box is not needed. And actually, that's a tool that we use in EMDR if we don't complete a target in a session, which is very common that we don't complete a target. imagine putting it in a box, and then I say, okay, you're going to leave the box with me, and then we'll come back to it next week.
I also, like when I went in, I also knew that the box had to get opened and I had to, and I was I'm like, listen, let's do this. I was that person like, oh, EMDR. Yeah, let's do it now. Am I going to be better like in an hour? That's awesome. No. So are there any side effects? I don't know if that you would call it side effects, but to EMDR that people should be aware of?
Yeah. If you're taking any kind of psychotropic, actually any medication, sometimes there can be interactions. Like I was once working with someone who had to be on beta blockers, and so I had to talk to her doctor, and we got like special permission, like don't take a beta blocker before EMDR because it'll prevent you from getting activated. So sometimes there can be like a medication interaction. If you're heavily using drugs or alcohol, also can affect the effectiveness. But as far as side effects of EMDR, the thing I hear the most is feeling really tired or having like a mild headache. When I was doing EMDR with eye movements, when I was working primarily in person, I was hearing much more headaches and eye strain. But these days I do mostly either the beeping or tapping. It's like a butterfly hug on yourself, and I guide you when to do it. And we're not going to have eye strain with that because there's no moving the eyes furiously back and forth. That was causing a lot of headaches and eye strain. But headaches are somewhat common. I mean, like you're building new neural pathways. You're going to be tired. That's hard work. Your body is generating new connections. So yeah, I would expect tiredness, and I would expect maybe, mild headache. If you have any like really, really notable side effects, talk to your therapist about it. Yeah.
I don't even know if it was my therapist that told me. I think it was maybe an acquaintance that had done EMDR said that they had really strange dreams.
Oh yeah.
After that. And so I was all anticipating. I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see what my dreams are. But I think I was so fatigued that I didn't dream. I don't think I might have had some dreams in there, but nothing that was notable enough for me to say I had the weirdest dream.
I do hear about weird dreams. Occasionally a disturbing dream, but we're stirring things up. Stuff is coming to the surface, and it's very rare that I've worked with someone who's not seen some relief from EMDR eventually.
Yeah. I had a tremendous change. Have you found that either the eye movement or the audio, does one work better than another, or does it just vary per person?
To person.
Okay.
Some people are really visual people with a really visual person. I might try the eye movements. It's a little awkward because I work virtually, so for the eye movements to happen, they would have to be so close up to their screen that it would feel weird. Like I would be like seeing just like the whites of their eyes.
That would be so weird.
But I always start with the butterfly tapping, just because I can vocally guide it, and it also helps people stay more connected to their body, which I think you can kind of separate the head out more. And then the beeping, if people are really like, sound oriented. If it's not working with one form of bilateral, I just try another. Most of the research has been done on the eye movements. So I think that a lot of people default to that. But it's rare. I don't think I've had anyone that didn't respond somewhat well to butterfly hold tapping. And I think because it is in the body and can ground you in the present in a way. The research would say start with eye movements, but that's because that's how all the initial research was done. Dr. Francine Shapiro, who discovered and developed EMDR, she was walking through a park in Brooklyn and thinking about something upsetting and moving her eyes side to side. And she found after a while that the upsetting thing wasn't upsetting. And she was like, I wonder what's here. And so she spent the rest of her career researching what is this bilateral stimulation and how does it affect the way memory is processed. And from that built the protocol for EMDR, which is what's used today.
Wow, I had no idea. That is crazy. So the eye movement part, were they thinking there was a link like when you go to sleep and you have, the rapid eye movement when you're sleeping?
Yeah.
Is there any connection with that?
I don't know. But what we do know is when there's bilateral stimulation, so side to side movement of some kind, it does help with memory kind of like cataloging and the way that things are stored. And I think that this is me just theorizing, but as we become a more and more sedentary society, I think bilateral movement is less and less a part of our day. I think we're seeing more and more unprocessed trauma coming up. We're less in touch with our bodies. We're not moving very much. There's something there, I think.
Oh, that makes sense. I'm also thinking that I wish I would have known about the butterfly tap when I was in college. Like, would it have made me remember everything for exams?
Well, if people want to try a resourcing activity, because obviously we would never process trauma on a podcast,
Right.
when I can't see you or
Right.
Can't see listeners. But you can use the butterfly tapping to enhance your access to positive memories and sensations. And I actually would recommend this. So let's say you go on a really beautiful hike with a friend. Like that night, just spend some time reflecting on just the beauty of the day and the connection and the views and like the sun and the animals and how you felt in your body moving out in nature. Spend some time like vividly recalling that and tapping side to side. That will enhance your resilience and your ability to cope, and it will give you wider access to those positive feelings.
Yeah. And I always forget that not everybody is watching and that some people are
Yeah.
listening. So the butterfly tap is like your arms are across each other and you're just
You're
tapping.
holding your shoulders across your chest and tapping side to side alternately.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else about EMDR that you can think of?
I hear a lot of people ask about like complex trauma or like, does it work for things beyond trauma?
Okay.
And the answer is yes, but you need a skilled EMDR therapist, like probably one that understands attachment very well, that is doing a very thorough resourcing phase. I have a clinician like this on my team who her specialty is complex trauma. And it really is about like, how do you repair those early attachment relationships that you didn't get? How do you kind of give yourself the nurturing and the safety that you never experienced? So you can, with a very strong relationship with your therapist and a very skilled therapist who understands, we're not just processing acute incidents here, and that they have kind of a game plan for how they approach that.
And just in case somebody doesn't know what complex trauma is.
It's anything that occurred like in relationship with a primary caregiver or like kind of deprived you of a sense of safety and stability, and like knowing there was a nurturing adult there to protect you as a child.
So that might not even be something that somebody's aware of right away.
I mean, fish don't notice the water.
Right.
If
I've
it's
never heard
always
that.
been your normal, then you're going to walk through life feeling hypervigilant, feeling distrustful of others, feeling like the only safety is in yourself. And that's completely understandable in that scenario.
Now, is that EMDR the same as if you're dealing with a specific trauma, but it's just you need somebody that's more trained into...
More trained, and they want to also be incorporating elements of potentially like parts work, internal family systems, attachment theory, tons of resourcing, and there's something else that I'm thinking of that it just ran out of my mind. But they need to be, it's a more creative approach rather than, okay, this memory, then we're going to go through the whole, cycle of it, because it is really complex. And so that would be a much longer term treatment.
And your company is called Laurel Collective?
Laurel Therapy Collective.
Okay, Laurel Therapy Collective. And is it is it all virtual, or do you do
all virtual?
Okay.
And we can serve people in California and Florida.
Okay. So how would people get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is laureltherapy.net.
Okay, that's easy. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you think that we've missed at all?
No, I don't think so.
I think we covered it. I mean, EMDR is great. Actually, just to get into the history of it, was there any specific kind of trauma that it was initially directed toward?
Well, I mean, our understanding of trauma is evolving, and 100 years ago, people were coming back from World War I a little different. And so the term shell shock was developed, and, people thought only combat veterans could experience trauma. But then they realized actually the next group to be included in our understanding of trauma was sexual trauma survivors. That they were seeing these people that have had sexual trauma and these people who've been in active combat are showing the same symptoms. Fascinating. So then after Vietnam, a lot more research went into studying trauma. But as far as EMDR, they first used it on combat veterans and first responders. That these kind of big T, acute traumas, even though they're not really acute. If you're in an active combat zone, there's going to be multiple traumas all the time. But kind of these discrete periods of time. Whereas okay, you come back from your tour of duty and then that's theoretically over, but it's never over. So they did a lot of early research on EMDR on combat veterans and on first responders. And EMDR had gained some traction by then, but I remember that after 9/11, a lot of first responders were wearing these little buttons that said EMDR, it's effing magic. Because it's not a modality that requires a ton of talking about your feelings. There's definitely some talking about feelings, but there's kind of an efficiency and an economy to it where a police officer or a firefighter who maybe isn't a therapy person might be more comfortable with it, even though it looks and sounds totally woo. Once you're oh, there's science behind it, they're yeah, okay, I want to be able to go back to work.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're an active participant in it. I mean, you have to be. I mean, you're an active participant in all therapy, but it's you're really actually working to get to that.
And you can stop anytime you want. It's not hypnosis. You do not lose control at any point. You might feel really overcome with emotion or overwhelmed, but yeah, you're always in control.
Yeah. For me, I found, so there would be sometimes I'd, be wherever and I'd feel okay. And then all of a sudden just a wave of emotion would just hit and I would start crying. I was like, where did that come from? And because, I had separated myself from a lot of it.
To survive. And adaptive coping.
Exactly.
And then your body was telling you, maybe this isn't working anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how does it happen with somebody who was in combat and there's multiple incidents of trauma? Do you have to do it for each individual one, or do you focus on a major traumatic?
Yeah. You don't usually have to do each one. That's a great question. Do you have to process every trauma in your life to experience relief in EMDR? The answer is no, you do not. So most trauma falls in somewhat of a chain. We all have a couple chains, right? That there's, I'll make something up. You have a chain that is the I'm not lovable chain. You have the chain that's I'm not safe. You have the chain that's I'm not capable. Right? And then if you can find the linchpin memory in those lines of dominoes that have been set up. If you can knock out the right one, it'll take the rest with them often.
Oh, that's a great description of that.
Yeah. So, even though I work with incredible people and a lot of them very accomplished, very successful, ambitious, and I'm no longer surprised. But often if we are taking a feeling state or something that we're like, yeah, why do we have this thought or this fear that's coming up? It goes back to being forgotten at school or something like that. These badass people.
Yeah.
And this I was forgotten at school. I was the only kid there. I was sitting in the
That's
office.
sad.
I know. And these memories, we can logically as adults know, I was perfectly safe. My mom had car trouble that day, but still we go back into this, I'm forgotten, I'm alone,
Yeah.
So when we can find, it doesn't have to necessarily be objectively the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It's just that linchpin domino, and taking that one out eliminates the whole string. Now, sometimes you have a whole bunch of linchpin dominoes, but if we tend to have clusters, so with the combat example, it would be was there a first or a worst event that happened? And you would start with that one and then see if the other ones fall with it.
Okay.
And if they don't, it's okay, that's interesting. I wonder what else is going on here. And then kind of getting in there until the line falls.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That has to be exhausting for you too, right? I feel
No.
No.
I mean,
I would need to sleep.
It's so energizing because I get just enough sessions a week where there's resolution or a breakthrough or someone has such a beautiful outcome and they unlock a new part of themselves. They're in a new relationship and it's actually a healthy one, or they get a job offer, or they take a big risk and it pans out. There's so much of that I'm privy to, that I'm yeah, I'm going to get in there with you and figure out which of these we need to clear out so that you can live a better life.
Oh, that's cool.
It's not exhausting at all. I don't think I have a hard job.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Because I think you have a hard job. All right. You already gave the website. So we have how to get in touch with you. Do you have any lasting encouragement or wisdom that you would like to leave with listeners?
Yeah. Yes, I definitely do. First, I want to say, if you want to learn in a lot more detail about EMDR, we actually have a free webinar you can watch at any point on our website on the EMDR page, where we actually made a fake client and we walked through all 8 phases of EMDR and what that looked like for her. And it is the college athlete example to hopefully not be too triggering. So, and we don't go into any description of the injury. But so that's available. But yes, the last thing I want to say to people is you're never going to feel 100% ready for EMDR. Just like you did, you can come into therapy and say, hey, I have this very locked box and I know I need to open it at some point. Can you help me get ready to open it? And the therapist should say yes, because you're never going to wake up and be I am ready to face my trauma. So start when you're almost ready, because that's as ready as you're going to be.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. Well, thank you so much, Laurel, for your time and explaining all of this. I think it's such an incredible modality that is super, super helpful. And I think a lot more people should explore it as an option. Yeah. But thank you again for coming on and sharing all that with us.
I'm always happy to talk about EMDR.
Okay, thanks.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.